first vote the same way.
We'll call this meeting to order.
Yes.
Start with roll call or pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the call.
Dear Supervisors, please be advised that the Trumpealeau County Board of Supervisors will meet at 7 p.m. on January 15th, 2024 in the county boardroom. All county board members' claims are due in the county clerk's office by noon on January 5th, 2024, so they can be prepared for audit committee approval. Sincerely, Paul Severson, county clerk.
Roll call.
Richard Turner.
Here.
Stacy Klein.
Here.
Richard Seychell.
Here.
Lori Severson. Andy Todd.
Here.
Emery Palmer.
Here.
Kevin Adams.
Here.
Dick Miller.
Here.
David Orsh.
Here.
John Austin.
Here.
Don Waldera. Robert Becker.
Here.
Dan Schreiner.
Here.
Kellen Nelson. David Larson.
Here.
Jeannie Nutter.
Here.
Ron Johnson.
Here.
14.
Okay. We have a quorum. This is why I said roll call. You gotta call it.
Oh, nuts.
It's on the agenda, that's why I read it that way. Okay. Appearances, do you have any appearances?
None.
Okay. Go to number, item 6.
Did you do this one?
No, that's why it's 2, 3, 4.
You skipped the
Open meeting law requires been met and complied with. You got me confused when you got roll call on the first line. So,
Yes.
they've been complied with. Adoption of the agenda. We have 11-item agenda.
I move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Nutter, second by Mr. Adams. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes of the December meeting.
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes
Second.
as written.
Motion by Ms. Nutter, second by Mr. Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
You gotta wait for
Yeah,
Emery,
that's
okay?
okay. No appearances, we're gonna go to item 6A. Environmental Land Use Committee.
I know it's in here somewhere.
Rezone.
Whereas Douglas J. Klink, Arcadia, Wisconsin, petitioner landowner, has requested the rezone of a parcel of land in the town of Arcadia for the purpose of creating 2 residential lots. And whereas the rezone is on approximately 68.3 acres more or less, and whereas a public hearing was held pursuant to section 59.69(5) of the Wisconsin statutes, and whereas the town of Arcadia supports the rezone request, and whereas the Environmental Land Use Committee moved to rezone this parcel from exclusive agriculture 2, EA2, to primary ag, PA, and it appears that the zoning change request is appropriate under the circumstances. Now be it resolved that the county adopt the attached ordinance amending the zoning district boundaries as indicated. Introduced by Environmental Land Use Committee, Kellen Nelson, David Larson, Randy Severson, Stacy Klein, Andrew Todd, Don Waldera, Anthony Munson.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Larson, second by Mr. Adams. Is there any discussion? Somebody from Land Use want to explain this one?
Bridge is here.
Oh. Verge is here.
Good evening. Is this on?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Verge Gamroth. I'm a zoning technician with the Department of Land Management. You have before you a resolution requested by Doug Klink to rezone from exclusive Ag 2, which is a density of 1 house per 35 acres in that zoning density. Mr. Klink only has 68.3 acres. Therefore, to make that split, he has to rezone to a higher density of zoning, which is 2 per 40, and that will allow him to create those residential lots that he's requesting. We did publish this in the newspaper December 13th and December 20th. I did have one landowner that is a neighbor to Mr. Klink contact me He basically wanted to know what Mr. Klink was going to do, and Mr. Klink wants to sell a lot to his daughter. It is contrary to the land use plan in that they call for exclusive ag, to stay in exclusive ag for the land use plan. However, right now there is an existing violation on it of 2 houses on 1 parcel, and we consider for zoning anything that's owned in the same entity as 1 parcel. So for instance, if I, Verge Gamroth, own land or several parcels and it's all in my name, that's considered 1 large parcel for zoning purposes. So in order to clear up that zoning violation, passing this rezone will help that. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Very good. Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you.
I think we're ready to vote.
You ready? Richard Sasha,
Yes.
Andy Todd,
Yes.
Emery Palmer,
Yes.
Kevin Adams,
Yes.
Dick Miller,
Yes.
David Orsh,
Yes.
John Austin,
Yeah.
Robert Becker,
Yes.
Dan Schreiner,
Yes.
Kellen Nelson,
Yes.
David Larson,
Yes.
Jean Rutter,
Yes.
Ron Johnson,
Yes.
Richard Turner,
Yes.
Stacy Klein.
Yes.
15-0.
Passed. Next item is the land management budget amendment.
I got them all over the place right now.
Is that one?
Oh, that's that one.
This one's
Yep. Whereas during the budget process, the Executive Finance Committee increased revenue requirements for the Department of Land Management. And whereas the increased revenues would not be met without an increase in fees or other budget changes. And whereas the Environmental Land Use Committee decided to amend the 2024 budget to address increased revenue requirements. Now be it resolved that the building inspection non-lapsing account be closed out and the 2024 building inspection budget expenses of $100,000 be coded to account 101.56110.211 and $98,000 of revenue for building inspection be coded to account 101.44300 inspections and $2,000 of revenue to 101.44302 seals. Introduced by Environment Land Use Committee, Kellen Nelson, David Larson, Stacy Klein, Andy Todd.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Nelson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Todd. Bird, you want to explain this one too?
No, I think Dave's taking that.
Oh, Dave's doing that? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I think that the resolution is pretty self-explanatory, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. It's just basically saying you asked us to increase revenue, and we need to reflect that in the budget, and I don't think it was when the budget got approved. So it's kind of a housekeeping matter.
Mr. Miller.
The non-lapsing account will be closed out completely.
Correct.
That'll be non-existent.
That's my understanding.
Okay. And I guess I'm a little unclear, we're talking about 200,000, and that exactly is will be used for what purpose?
The revenue is to pay for partly to pay for our expenses in doing inspections and so on. Kellen?
I can speak to it a little bit. So the non-lapsing account goes back to when you had a building inspector on staff. We would have a non-lapsing account so that we could float. If you have a year where it goes down, you can still carry that salary of that person, benefits, etc. We have since went to a contractor method, so it's money in, money out. We don't need a non-lapsing account
I understand
at
that.
this point. So
Yeah.
the funds are going into the other accounts to make up for the funds that we were short in the budget.
Short for this particular
Well,
budget
the
year?
exec finance asked us to increase funds by 15,000, I think it was.
50, yeah.
Yeah, and so to offset, rather than increasing fees to the general public, we have these dollars here in this non-lapsing account. Let's use what we have and not increase fees at this point in time.
So it is
For
not
future
increasing.
inspections.
What's that?
For future inspections, this will help offset some of the
This
additional,
offsets additional costs.
to keep a lower charge to anyone.
The public, at least at this point.
It'll delay the need for increased
Right.
fees.
I mean, and when we renegotiate with our contractor, it could go up at that point, but it'll go up.
The goal
But
is
what-
just to maintain a current
Correct.
level as long as possible.
Yeah, well, as long as it's reasonable.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
Any other questions? Not, we'll call for the roll.
Jeannie Nutter,
Yes.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Bridget Turner,
Yes.
Stacy Klein,
Yes.
Richard Seyshell.
Yes.
Andy Todd.
Yes.
Emery Palmer,
Yes.
Kevin Adams.
Yes.
Dick Miller,
Yes?
David Orch,
Yes.
John Awesome,
Yes.
Robert Becker,
Yes.
Dan Schreiner,
Yep.
Kellen Nelson,
Yes.
David Larson.
Yes.
Next item comes from law enforcement and exec finance. Transfer money from the general fund to the towers.
Whereas Trumbull County Emergency Services is in the process of upgrading its equipment at current tower sites and constructing an additional tower. And whereas the current system includes contracts with United States Cellular, US Cellular, for the rent and use of 5 US cellular cell towers, with those contracts in effect until May 2026. Whereas a 6th tower will be located at a Pigeon Falls site. Whereas the construction site project requires new or upgraded equipment to be added to the towers at all 6 sites, and the new and upgraded equipment will result in increased contract costs beginning on or about December 1 of 2023. Whereas those 5 current contracts will need to be amended to reflect the additional cost, and a new contract will be needed for a Pigeon Falls site. And whereas the 5 current contracts, the county has paid the required amounts through May 31st of 2024, but it will need to enter into new contracts with new terms beginning June 1st, 2024. And whereas the 2024 budget for the sheriff's office includes the cost of the 6 US cellular contracts, but the amount of $14,477.75 is now due, and a 2023 payment of that amount from the general fund will be necessary. Now be it resolved that the Trumbull County Board of Supervisors hereby approves the transfer of $14,477.75 from the county's general fund to account 101.52160.530 for the purpose of funding the county's radio tower project. Oh, boy. That's why I stopped there. Introduced by Law Enforcement Committee, Dan Schreiner, Ron Johnson, Andy Todd, David Orch, Stacy Klein, and Executive Finance Committee, Bridget Turner, David Larson, Richard Seyshell, John Awesome.
Move to approve.
Motion by
I'll
Ms.
second.
Nutter.
Turner.
Ms. Turner, second. Any, oh, sheriff's here, explain it.
So I'll try to explain it in a nutshell, but so this has to do with the upgrade of the public services radio system, and we have to touch every tower in that system. So my 2023-2024 budget was adequately funded for the old contracts that expire in 2026. We renegotiated new contracts that begin on June 1st, 2024. So between December 31st and June of 2023 and June 1st of 2024, there's a prorated amount for the work being done on the towers. We couldn't wait until June 1st to start the work, so we actually started it in mid-contract. And these amounts reflect the additional amount owed for the 2023-2024 contract, so that we can get in and start actually working on the towers. The 2024 budget is adequately funded for the new contracts. It's just an addition to the previous budget.
Any questions at all?
This wasn't in your
24 budget, but you knew it was coming.
It's in so this is a contract that starts June 1st. They run June 1st to May 31st. So we did put it in the 2024 budget beginning June 1st, running till May 31st, 2025. But it was not in there for the prorated amount beginning in December because we didn't know what those amounts were. We were still negotiating, and matter of fact, we're still negotiating with a non-US cell tower yet for the project. It took a while to get those new contracts revised, so that's why we couldn't budget for it back in October when you were doing the budgets.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
The work on the towers, does that reflect antenna changes or adding antennas?
Yes. Yep, it's both in the control tower, the control booths around the towers, and antennas on the towers.
So that was expenses that could not have been anticipated until they began setting this new hardware in place.
Right.
So to speak.
Yep, so they had to, the first thing they had to do was get into these towers and do a tower study to see if the additional load could be handled by the tower. And then they were adding some functionality to the towers. They have to analyze whether the signals are going to be, so the towers are going to be see one another to talk, stuff like that. There wasn't any physical work being done yet, but there was some preparatory work that was started. But again, they don't, until they know what equipment is going to be on the towers, they don't know how, or they can't give us a quote for the contract for each individual tower, if that makes sense.
Ms. Blair.
I hate to ask this question now, but couldn't we use unassigned ARPA funds for this instead of general fund?
That would be your decision, I guess.
Because we did use some ARPA funds for something similar. I can't put my head right on it. But I mean, it's a good use of that fund.
So there was $400,000 in savings from ARPA funds that was going to be used for the project.
Right.
The county board has chosen to designate $200,000 of that to upgrade the radios and dispatch. So there is a pot of money that will be undesignated when the project is done, I believe, if it hasn't been already. So
It's, I don't mean to bring it up now, but I just, as you were talking, I thought we used ARPA funds for similar, and we still have some unassigned ARPA.
I know that. I know Mr. Larson's got different plans for that.
Are you gonna buy some more land or something?
Well, you never know.
It's part of the, we were actually saving those funds for part of the remodel. For the
The
remodel.
renovation.
I know, I hear you. It's just that I was just investigating that possibility to use ARPA funds since we had used it before. I just think this is a better use of ARPA funds than building, but that's just me. Sorry.
No, okay, if there's 200,000 there that won't be used,
those are very rough figures. It's not quite 200,000. So, yeah.
that money will cycle back into the general fund afterwards then, right?
I don't know how that works.
No,
No.
it stays in the ARPA.
That's ARPA money.
Okay, it stays in ARPA money, okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
If you wanted to, I don't know, if you want to make that a motion and see if you get a second? To take it from ARPA funds rather than general fund?
Is it possible, before I do all of that, is it possible to do that? You seem to be the keeper of the ARPA fund.
Mr. Vice Chair, right?
I guess it would be possible to do it.
It's $14,477.75.
It's kind of
Can it be 478? Anyway, I'd make a motion to use ARPA funds for this project rather than general fund.
Motion.
I would second that motion.
You got a quicker second than I thought. Motion made and seconded. Okay, you want to vote on the amendment?
I think there should be some discussion.
Okay, discussion.
I guess I for those who've been dealing with this, I would assume exec finance, you wanna react to this?
I'm sorry.
I guess it's me, I guess I don't have that big a problem with it, other than the fact that this is what we've come up with. We know there's ARPA money there. If we take ARPA money, it means we may have to take money out of the general fund if we can't trim the building costs enough. So it's 6 of one, half of the other in my mind.
Can we use ARPA funds to pay for construction overruns?
Yes, well, we aren't gonna have any of those.
Yeah, right. Who's right?
I,
Go ahead.
I just brought this up because I think having the cell towers is really critical. And I feel like that's a really smart use of ARPA funds.
Yeah, it's ours.
Yeah, I was from the exec finance committee. I remember us having the conversation about, the money that we're gonna need for the towers. And through the budgeting process, we were, as everybody knows, nip and tuck to meet within the levy limit. And so we purposely said, come back to us when you know what those monies were gonna be for the new contract. And so therefore, in my opinion, it should come from the general fund, because that's kind of where money comes from to fund the county.
Yes.
So where ARPA funds were kind of designated these specific things we could do it with. Now, you're correct, we could if we wanted to, but it's kind of like, which hand do you take it from? Either way, when we come up with the final resolution for expending money on the remodel, we're gonna have to take it from the general fund if we don't get it from ARPA. So that's my opinion, that's where we're at.
Any more comments? Okay, we'll go for a vote on the amendment. Do you roll call, or if you just?
Well, we can listen first.
Sure, okay, let's, all those in favor of the amendment, which is to take it from ARPA funds versus general fund, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign?
Aye.
I
Okay.
think it
Alright.
died. I think it died
I just,
by my judgment.
the money needs to come from somewhere.
Yeah, so we're back to the original motion.
Okay.
Any comments on the original motion to take it from general funds? Not? This is to take it to a call roll on the general funds?
Can I just make one more comment before you go? There is a possibility that I will be coming back again because we are still negotiating with Tri-County Communications on a tower. So we don't know what that's going to be. It might be the same as what it has been. It might be an increase. I don't know. So just so if I have to come back, you'll understand what that was.
You're always welcome.
You have to find it in your budget.
And I might be able to, hopefully it isn't that much. So we'll see.
Okay, call the roll.
Robert Becker. This is coming from the general fund.
Yes.
Dan Schrank.
Yes.
Kellen Nelson.
Yes.
David,
Larson?
no,
David
this is the
Larson.
one that's wrong every time we come up to it. It says David Nelson.
Okay.
David Larson.
I'll say yes too.
Okay. Judy Nutter.
Yes.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Bridget Turner.
Yes.
Stacy Klein.
Yes.
Richard Seixas.
Yes.
Andy Todd.
Yes.
Emery Palmer.
Yes.
Kevin Adams.
Yes.
Dick Miller.
Yes.
David Orsh.
Yes.
John Austin.
Yes. 0. Okay, passed. Item C, Extension and Education Communications Committee, BEAD Local Planning Grant Survey Reimbursement.
Whereas UW Madison Division of Extension of Trempealeau County would like approval for the BEAD Local Planning Grant Survey Reimbursement. Whereas this grant is in the amount of $1,000, is intended to support county educators in their work involved in the education regarding BEAD, which is Broadband Equity, Access, and Development. Now be it resolved that Trempealeau County accepts this update and that money be deposited in revenue account 101.46769 and expense account 101.55622.999 for BEAD Local Planning Grant Survey Reimbursement as a non-lapsing account. Introduced by Extension Education and Communication Committee, Andy Todd, Richard Seixas, Kevin Adams, Don Waldera.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Klein, second by Mr. Adams. Any discussion on this? And then we'll just call the roll.
Stacy Klein,
Yes.
Richard Seixas,
Yes.
Andy Todd,
Yes.
Emery Palmer,
Yes.
Kevin Adams,
Yes.
Dick Miller,
Yes.
David Orsh,
Yes.
Don Awesome,
Yeah.
John Waldera. Whoops, no, she's not here. I was all frustrated. Robert Becker,
Yes.
Dan Schreiner,
Yes.
Kellen Nelson,
Yes.
David Larson,
Yes.
Gene Nutter,
Yes.
Ron Johnson,
Yes.
Bridget Turner,
Yes.
15-0.
Okay. Parks, Tourism, and Economic Development Committee. Peter. Is that the one?
You
Yeah.
Whereas the Parks, Tourism, and Economic Development Committee's original budget did not provide for increases in additional funding, and whereas the additional funds will generate additional expenditures not budgeted for, whereas the additional revenue is $2,000 to be used for additional expenses, and whereas the Parks, Tourism, and Economic Development Committee has been notified it will receive funding in the amount of $18,337.40 to be used for the BEAD grant. Now therefore be it resolved that the expense account 101.553556.999 BEAD expenses and revenue account 101.43703 BEAD grant be amended to show the increase of $2,000. Introduced by Parks, Tourism, and Economic Development Committee, Buzz Zorgi, Jeannie Nutter, it's all through here, Robert Becker, Kevin Adams, Gene Galazinski, Lori Severson, Don Waldera.
Petrie?
You didn't.
He wasn't,
oh,
he
no,
wasn't at the
it.
meeting.
Didn't sign up.
I move to approve. Second.
Motion by Ms. Nutter, second by Mr. Klein. Any other comments, questions? Go ahead.
With Supervisor Nutter and I on the Parks and Tourism Committee, when this money became available, we thought it would be a good use of the funds that would fit into its parameters for that.
Can I just give a quick explanation of what's going on here? So you'll recall last year the county received a BEAD planning grant, broadband equity and diversity planning grant in the amount of $18,333.70 or $337.40. When we did the budget this year, there was a typo and the revenue and expense line was $2,000 less. So it's not changing. We didn't get any more money. It's just correcting the budgeted amount to reflect that we always had $18,337.40 and we will. So it's a housekeeping item.
Amy was very sorry.
I wasn't gonna call out her name. We take responsibility as a department for the typo.
Yeah. It's more money than we thought we had.
Good.
Okay. No other comments? Call the roll.
Ron Johnson,
Yes.
Bridget Turner,
Yes.
Stacy Klein,
Yes.
Richard Seixas,
Yes.
Andy Todd,
Yes.
Emery Palmer,
Yes.
Kevin Adams,
Yes.
Dick Miller,
Yes.
David Orsh,
Yes.
John Austin,
Yeah.
Robert Becker,
Yes.
Dan Schreiner,
Yes.
Kellen Nelson,
Yes.
David Larson,
Yes.
Jeannie Nutter.
Yes.
15-0.
Okay. Exec Finance Committee, amend the county code to reflect the county administrator's
No,
position.
we got one more.
Oh, we got one more, missed
Two
one?
and three more.
Oh, yeah. Where do you see those?
There's another
The snowmobile trail
Yeah, that's what I got
maintenance.
next.
Oh,
Right,
this
right
one.
here.
Okay, repeated budget to accept increase in grant funds for the snowmobile.
Whereas the Parks, Tourism, and Economic Development Committee's original budget did not provide for increases in additional funding. And whereas the state is providing Trumbull County with additional grant funds to be used for maintenance of the county's snowmobile trails that was not previously budgeted for. And whereas the additional grant funds will not require the county to make any additional appropriations. And whereas the Parks, Tourism and Economic Development Committee has been notified it will receive funding in the amount of $76,830 to be used for state-funded snowmobile trail maintenance, grooming, and signing. Now therefore be it resolved that the budget expenditure account 101.55440.395 be adjusted to show the accurate amount, and budget revenue account 101.43571 be amended to show the increase of $2,000. Introduced by Parks, Tourism, and Economic Development Committee, Buzz Sorgi, Jeannie Nutter, Robert Becker, Kevin Adams, Gene Galazinski, Lori Severson, Dawn Waldera.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Turner, second by Mr. Adams.
This actually is one where this was 2,000 additional that we didn't anticipate. And we became aware that the DNR snowmobile grant would be 2,000 more after the budget was passed. So this is not a typo. And this is truly, it's new money that we weren't expecting.
Just need snow.
Just need more snow.
Yeah.
They did groom. They're not grooming. Okay. No other discussion? Call the roll.
David Orsh,
Yes.
John Austin,
Yes.
Robert Becker.
Yes.
Dan Schreiner,
Yes.
Ellen Nelson,
Yes.
David Larson,
Yes.
Jeannie Nutter,
Yes.
Ron Johnson,
Yes.
Bridget Turner,
Yes.
Stacy Klein,
Yes.
Richard Seixas.
Yes.
Andy Todd.
Yes.
Emery Palmer,
Yes.
Kevin Adams,
Yes.
Dick Miller.
Yes.
15 to 0.
Okay, Tech Finance Committee. Amend the county code to reflect county administrator position. And it's in your whole pile of papers.
FX. Whereas Trumbull County currently has an administrative coordinator serving those functions provided within Trumbull County Code of Ordinances, hereinafter code, as applicable and pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 59.19. Whereas on July 17th, 2023, and as memorialized by Trumbull County Board Resolution 2023-0701, the Trumbull County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to replace the role of administrative coordinator with a county administrator as allowed by Wisconsin statute 59.18. And whereas to effectuate and fulfill that direction and to comply with Wisconsin statute 59.18 and other Wisconsin law provisions of the code must be revised and amended accordingly. And whereas attached as Exhibit A are those necessary amendments to the code which specify the responsibilities and duties of the county administrator and transfer those to the county administrator where needed and appropriate. And whereas if approved, these amendments will be effective on January 31st, 2024. Now be it resolved that the Trumbull County Code of Ordinances be amended as set forth within Exhibit A to make evident the county administrator position. Introduced by Executive Finance Committee, Bridget Turner, David Larson, Richard Seixas, John Lawson, David Orsh.
I'll make a motion to approve omitting section E for law enforcement emergency management to go back for, to be adjusted in some way by that committee, and section J, the audit self-filing.
Second to that?
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Questions, comments? It's pretty lengthy.
Statutorily, can we make those changes?
Yes, and those are consistent with my recommendations, just because there's some discretion there that I think would be appropriate for the county board to really review and weigh in.
No other comments?
I'd just like, Mr. Chair, I'd like to say, I wish we would have had this 5 months ago. And with that,
Well,
it would
we
have
ha-
gave us a little more thought. You know, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's a lot to grasp in a short time. And, yeah, I mean, it's what we did, so we have to do what we have.
Now, these are basically statutorily imposed by the state, so we really got no choice.
Yeah, most of them are, and we can go through the ones where if there's a little bit of discretion, but some of them are very black and white. For example, highway is an example of that. The Board of Health, Human Services are all statutory committees. The part of the Land Management Committee that is zoning is statutory. So those are very narrow with what you can do. Other parts, for example, I mentioned our Supervisor Turner had talked about the Audit Committee in promotion. There's a little bit of discretion in that regard too.
I think there'll be discussion ongoing.
Absolutely.
As we progress through this.
There'll probably be some ongoing changes even after the administrator's here. This is just kind of a rough draft at this point.
Well, I assume that goes in, this will go into effect if we approve it.
You're right.
It's more than a rough draft, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
January 31st.
Yeah, that's on January 31st. But that part D that was omitted will go back to law enforcement committee. Part G goes back to exec planning for more discussion. So anyway, we can vote on what the rest of the proposal. Is there any more questions on the rest of the ordinance?
Question, there are always, I think there were a couple spots, I don't know if it was also typos or if I'm reading it correctly, but right in the beginning, page 1 for section 1, the underlined section, the law allows for county administrator to appoint such appointment.
Oh,
Is that-
such appointment, shall I say?
Okay.
So thank you.
There was one other. Oh. So page 12, under number 11, I think there's just the same thing where process administrative coordinators, so we have TUDA, TUDA, and TUDA. County administrator, I think it was just listed twice, just the words TUDA.
Do you know what?
Oh, the line, so it's line 4 and then line 5. So I think you can cross out the
sure. Thank you.
Okay. Any other points?
Oh, can I just ask you, just more explanation. So page 15, line 19, where it's highway commissioner for the field. How does that, can you just expound on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that was a question that I think the Highway Committee had. I know a number of supervisors had. So the statutory provisions for highway are in Wisconsin Statutory Chapter 83. And I did bring it just in case anybody needed to see it. I have some, I don't know if you wanna, I didn't bring it enough for everybody, but I have a couple of extra ones here if anybody wants to see it. So essentially, if you take a look, and I don't know how far you want me to go into it, I don't want to take up anybody's time more than what's necessary. So please stop me if I'm going too far into it.
That's it. Just kidding.
So if you take a look at 8301, you take a look at the duties, take a look at section 1 as well. So section 1, election and appointment, as well as 7. And then you read it in conjunction with 83015, which is the highway committee. When we had the administrator come on board, it changed really the supervision of the highway commissioner, essentially. And so my recommendation for 2.06 is that and that would be a great one to talk about now, is that goes back to the county board at another time, and it comes back in the chapter 7. And we deal with, I know the highway committee had some additional questions about that. That's one where if we wanted to, we could pull it out, talk about it at highway, and then bring it back next month as well. But my recommendation is, right now 2.06 talks about how that commissioner is appointed. And we look at that because now again, it's subject to the administrator's authority, but we consolidate all of our traffic highway provisions into one chapter is also what I'm getting at too. So put it in chapter 7. So we could remove that as well.
Yeah.
We'd have to probably amend the motion, but we could do that.
Because we talk about it next month and get more
Mhm.
information, there's just a lot to take in that.
It is.
Yeah.
So we need to pick up.
If you wish to do that.
Good.
You could either rescind it and then redo it again with 2.06 coming back after highway season, or there could be amendment to it.
I'll make an amendment to, remove and come back to 2.0658. The highway commissioner term.
Yeah,
I'll second that.
seconded by Mr. Miller. We got a motion from Ms. Turner, seconded by Mr. Miller.
Can I just,
Discussion on the amendment?
oh, I just need clarity. So this is an amendment to your original motion?
Motion.
Okay,
Correct.
all right, just to deal with highways commissioner, okay. I'm on board
Basically,
now.
just that one line on page 15, line 19.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? So this is to page 15.
I'm on the wrong page, that's why. I was at the highway committee. Oh, I'm sorry.
Page 15, line 19. Well, my understanding, we're just,
It already has a line for it, so.
We can either leave it 2.06 in as you want, it's up to you. And we can pull up 2.06 if you wanna see it. Really what I would recommend is bringing it back in chapter 7 with the updated provisions. So that's what I'm saying today.
so we can bring it back next month.
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Chair?
yeah,
These items that we're talking about bringing back, can these materials be provided us prior to the meeting? For those of us who are not involved in any of these particular committees are going to be totally in the dark until that meeting unless there's some data or some material provided us.
The other thing I would keep in mind, so the answer is yes, but the highway committee is going to also have to vote on it too, so they'll be part of that process as well.
Right. But we have to approve what they decide
Mhm.
or not, right?
Right,
so we can get it out as soon as we can. Law enforcement has to meet, I don't know when law enforcement meets, but they have to meet too, so. What? Yeah.
yeah, that's what you all have access to.
Yeah.
You all have access to all the supervisors have access to all those documents. Okay.
Yeah.
Cause that might be in the highway packet.
Oh, I don't do your agenda, so I don't get that.
Yeah, but once,
County board got it.
but once it's gone through the committee, you should have access to it through the. Even if- even if- through the county board.
Okay.
Question.
At least get it a week ahead of time. Okay, voting on the amendment to omit item 19, page 15, line 19. Follow roll.
This is a roll call?
So I just want to do aye. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, carried. Okay,
Now we're back to the.
now we're
original.
back to the original motion with the amendments. That we can call a roll.
There's no-
You ready?
Yep.
Dan Schreiner,
Yes.
Kellen Nelson,
Yes.
David Larson,
Yes.
Gene Nutter,
Yes.
Ron Johnson,
Yes.
Bridget Turner,
Yes.
Stacy Klein,
Yes.
Richard Seixas.
Yes.
Andy Todd,
Yes.
Emery Palmer,
Yes.
Kevin Adams,
Yes.
Dick Miller,
Yes.
David Orsh,
Yes.
John Awesome,
Yeah.
Robert Becker.
Yes.
Also, exec finance committee, assigning CapEx funds to park improvement.
Whereas the CapEx 2020 Hampton, Rochester, Lacrosse High Voltage Transmission Line Project required payments to impacted communities as compensation for negative environmental impacts. Whereas Trumbull County was awarded $1.2 million in environmental adjustment funding including a recent payment of $162,150, which was received in November 2023. Whereas the intent of CapEx environmental adjustment payments is to provide funds for park improvements, to purchase environmentally sensitive sites, to make wetland improvements, and to assist in mitigating the negative impacts of power line project. And whereas the Trumpealeau County Department of Land Management recently completed a master plan which outlines a number of CapEx eligible projects to add new amenities at Petrick Park. Whereas the Executive Finance and Parks, Tourism, and Economic Development Committees this month voted to support these funds for park improvement. Now be it resolved that the recent CapEx payment of $162,150 received by Trumpealeau County be designated for park facilities development. And be it further resolved that this money be deposited in revenue account 101.46744, park improvement donations, and expense account 101.55201.999, and to allow Trumpealeau County Parks access to these monies. Respectfully submitted, Executive and Finance Committee, David Larson, Richard Turner, Richard Seisha, John Ross.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Adams. I see we have,
I'm here if there's any questions. Again, this is money that we weren't necessarily expecting. And it came in and Supervisor Nutter brought this to my attention, brought it to the attention of the PTED committee, which in reviewing, what the eligible expenses are that this money could be used for, decided that it would be a really good fit with what we've got planned for Petrick Park. For those of you who don't remember, we've got a recreational pond that we're looking to develop there this year. We applied for a DNR grant, initially didn't get it, later found out that we did get it, so we are proceeding ahead on getting a rec pond designed to be constructed at the park hopefully this year. And then we have additional amenities that we are developing as part of the Petrick Park Master Plan that came before the county board, I think, early last year, including development of some new playground areas. It's not just playground equipment, it's actually playground areas that would be consistent with the environment and youth-focused theme and mission of the park, as well as part of this contract we have with SRF Consulting out of Minneapolis, who's doing the rec pond design. They are also doing some work on locating a future bridge location at the park so that we can span the Trempealeau River and provide access to the county-owned land on the east side of the Trempealeau River, which would open up a multitude of other opportunities for increasing recreation at this really unique park. So the motion is just asking your concurrence to allocate those monies towards the park reserve. The more we have, the more we can do, and the sooner we can do it.
I'd like to ask if other projects have been considered for these funds. I am certainly a supporter of our parks. However, we have one park located in the county which is more challenging for certain citizens of the county to get to utilize. Have we looked at actually other uses for these funds? I know that there's certainly interest in Petrick Park. However, it's not as accessible to the county citizens as a whole. And I'd like to say there are environmentally sensitive areas in the counties, and with the current weather patterns and climate change, potentially we should be exploring some other uses of these funds to mitigate potential natural disasters, flood control projects, environmental impacts that are out there. And I think that's a discussion that should have occurred, perhaps that did, with Exec Finance Committee, if someone can enlighten me on where we're at on that.
I'll speak to what I remember. I did bring that up. If we needed to consider other areas that might be looking for or in need, the answers that came back to me was that the other areas of the land use, environment, etc., got a considerable chunk of the first money, and Petrick Park did not get very much. So that was one of the reasons we shifted to it this way.
That was before my time, but Supervisor Palmer, this is Dave Carlson. I appreciate your question. And like I said, we certainly have plenty that we could use it on at Petrick Park, but we also have land that's owned by the county and managed by the Department of Land Management and Parks down around the Trempealeau lakes. And with our new Park and Rec coordinator on board, that is something that we're going to be looking at, is how can we use that? You know, we used it previously as camping, and we found out later that was not permitted, but there are some permittable uses down there. And we may be looking at, you know, putting some simple shelters out there, or picnic tables, so that some of that property that we own down there around the Trempealeau lakes could be used as, some small pocket parks, or, very small parks, putting maybe a canoe landing, canoe and kayak launch on the west side of Round Lake, which abuts up against some of the property we own right along the Conservancy there. So by no means do I want to convey that if we get this money put in the Park Reserve Fund, that it all would be used for Petrick Park. There's certainly other projects that we could use it for.
I would be inclined, I guess, these funds don't lapse. We have them sitting there. My personal take on this is I think I'd like to see where those funds are being spent directly, rather than simply allocating them to the Parks Committee prior to that allocation. So that being said, I am not in support of this resolution.
Okay, that's better.
If I could just speak to, we don't have microphones, are we? Okay, we're good, all right. If I could just speak to your concerns, Supervisor Palmer, the statutes really reference areas where this money can be used, and it's park, conservancy, and wetland programs. And when we got the $1.2 million several years ago, we did referrals for proposals around the county, and a lot of that money went to different projects to support wetlands and conservation programs. I think the real reason we want to focus on Petrick Park is what you actually said, is to make it more accessible to everybody in the community. The play area that we're looking at, we're not hoping, but it would be ADA accessible to kids with disabilities. We've done a lot of work at the park to make it wheelchair accessible to different areas. We want to enhance our programs for kids. Anything that we can do with children to encourage them in the direction of conservation is really critical to the people on the Parks Committee. We have wetland issues at the park that we can consider. We have a new prairie savanna that we planted 2 years ago. So the whole park itself is just a massive conservation area that we want to make accessible to everybody in the county. And the focus of the park, when it was given to us by the Petrick family, was for children and for kid programs. So we really want to enhance our programs for kids. We're even talking about, maybe using that other shelter as a place where kids can stay overnight for 4-H programs. So I am totally in support of this money coming to the park, because we learned during COVID that the park was used a great deal, and people love that place, so.
Okay.
Yes, the manager. Oh, I'm just wondering, if we don't designate this money to the parks, where does it sit?
It's gonna sit.
It is sit, so we have time.
It has to be designated to park improvement, wetlands. It has to be, this is money that we should have gotten, as I understand,
I can explain
4
that
years
part.
ago. It's not
Yes.
just something that came out of the blue, well, it kind of came out of the blue, but.
Did come out of the blue, because in the letter that we got, it said that the 1.2 million that we got was an estimate of what the cost was gonna be for it. When they had the actual costs, we got this much more, is what it is.
So my question was, if we don't designate this money to this fund here, we still have it. We can designate it next month, the next month, or the next month. We're not gonna lose it. They don't need it right this minute. So it's just, I think what I'm getting out of this, do we have to make the decision today to go to parks, is what they're saying, for everybody to understand, or maybe somebody might have some ideas down the road where this money could go.
But it's really specific about where it goes.
Right, amen, yep, I agree.
It can't go, you know,
Yep.
it's really clear in the statutes how this money needs to be spent.
If I could make a suggestion, as manager of the department, or this particular part of the department, I would have no qualms at all if you wanted to say, put it in the Parks Improvement Fund, but sort of earmark that. I mean, segregate it right now. And if the department and the PTED committee want to bring back projects to use that, to run it through the PTED committee and through the county board. That way it's, well, I'm just saying that way it's there, but you know, we're not in any hurry to spend it. It's a question of there's a check and, you know, I assume it's been cashed and it's sitting somewhere. Yeah. So the money, where does it get allocated?
The money's there and the need is there, and that's the issue.
Chair?
George.
So for those of us who haven't been around or weren't around when the Apex program came out, and Supervisor Miller's point, there's specific things that it has to be used on. Assuming there was a lot of things that we used it on in the past, I'd like to be brought up to date as to what those are, and I want to point out that it does say in the resolution that if this isn't accurate, it probably should be changed, but it says, and to assist in mitigating the negative impacts of the power line project. And what were those things that were mitigated, or we needed to mitigate? Have we done that? And what were the projects that took place to do the mitigation on the negative impacts? Do we know? Did we do anything?
Yes, we did. We had RFP, who was on the committee with me? Am I the only one standing that was part of that committee?
More likely.
Yeah, I
Mostly-
handled the money.
It was mostly civilians anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sent out notices to all, you know, to rotted gun clubs, to any environmental thing that was going on in the county got notice about this money. I wish I had at the tip of my tongue where it all went. 400. You probably remember.
Some I remember, like the GET Elementary got some of the money, and that new refuge building in Learning Center.
Yep.
I know they got 400,000.
That was basically a federal.
Yeah, we
That's
gave money to the
land.
federal.
We gave money to the federal.
Right, but that building is used by every single kid that goes to school in Trempealeau County. They used to have to sit outside under a tent for educational programs down there. Now there's an educational building. Some of the rod and gun people who are in this room might recall,
The bike trails got money.
we helped build ADA fishing ramps for some of the parks.
It was approximately 30 projects that we had, and before I could cut a check to the club or the place that did it, Pat Malone had to give approval that that project was completed.
And there were matching funds for those projects. It was
So why wouldn't we want to maximize this dollar value and try to put RFPs out again, see if there's other parties in the county that are in the areas that were more directly affected by these power lines, see if we, have some projects that someone wants to bring additional money to the table and get more done with their projects. There might be other grant sources out there for these. I know they are earmarked for environmentally sensitive and mitigation of that. There is a lot of flexibility in their use. I was involved with writing letters and corresponding with the DOA for Town of Gale in their use of their funds, and there is quite a bit of flexibility. I'm just hesitant to turn that money over to the Parks Department where it is a pretty limited area where it is utilized versus its full potential.
well, the towns and villages.
Go ahead.
I don't disagree with the fact that this money could be well used by the Parks Department or Petrick Park specifically. I think what I would like to see is the Parks Committee come back and say what specifically they're using this dollar amount for. So are you gonna plan to use 20% for education with kids? Is 30% going to the construction of a recreational pond and 40% going to a bridge? We don't have any of those numbers yet. So it's still extremely vague in my opinion. I don't, with the concept of it going to the park and utilizing it for recreation, I definitely believe that the residents in the county are looking for places to recreate and outdoor spaces specifically. But I would really like to see a little more detailed plan. Because right now, I don't think with the wish list, you can fit everything on the wish list here. So seeing that the Parks Department can narrow that down and say, here's what our priorities are for this, here's some estimated dollars. Even if it comes to this amount, because I think it's a good use of the funds.
Mr. Chair?
That's all I have.
Mr. Miller?
I would like to just make a comment for Emery. When this money came in, any municipality, and I think that would include the townships that were in the immediate area of the High Line, were given a substantial amount of money. In fact, I think it far exceeded what the county received.
And they get actually an annual payment. County only got a one-time shot.
So there were monies going into those areas to help to deal with that High Line issue. So I think that this money is really a little different pot of money.
It is kind of different because, you know, like you said, they get an annual fee continually. It'll
Forever.
Continue on forever, where this is basically our second
This
shot
is
at it.
one-time shot.
There were actually about 50 projects that were submitted, and the committee came up with, I think 24 or 25 was the number. That got money, the rest didn't. So I can see where maybe the rest of them might be wondering, well, maybe it's their turn to get some of that too.
But if they're in areas where they get money every year, they have
I think that
access
was
to
one
it.
thing we looked at,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
I think maybe just add a few more comments to what Ms. Nutter is commenting on. All of these projects met the requirements as set forth by the committee as well as the law in terms of providing education opportunities, playground issues were worked on, I think, up in Strum, around the lake area. There were a lot of projects that fit the requirements as required by the federal mandate or wherever it came from. And you know, I think, you know, they did a we of a job, because this took hours and hours. So the committee really worked very hard to be fair and prioritize those projects that came before them.
I just got a feeling we're not gonna get anywhere tonight. She has a folder, Stacy has a folder in the office from all the projects that were funded before, that we could table this for 1 month and discuss it next month, because I don't think we're
I'll
gonna.
make a motion to table.
Please.
I'll second.
What's made, seconded to table for 1 month?
When you table, can you bring it back?
Yeah.
I've never quite, okay.
Can you postpone it instead of table?
I'd rather postpone it.
Okay,
Postpone it till next month?
Postpone it to next month.
It's postponed.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say a date
Postponed to-
specific, right,
Yeah.
Susan? Yeah, it's postponed to
To
date
a date
specific.
specific.
Yep.
To a
And do I gotta
date
pull mine
specific.
back? I'll pull my second
Big
back.
difference between that.
Mine's an amendment to yours.
No, you're gonna do that one.
This is to postpone, which
This is
overrides the one that was already.
Overrides.
Yep.
Overrides everything else.
It was Turner and Todd.
Yeah,
So
we're voting on to postpone.
before we vote, so do you want something from the PTED committee on,
By the next meetings.
it's gonna be difficult to say we're gonna spend 2,800, can you do that?
We'll certainly put it on the PTED agenda for next month. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was going to mention is I'm sure when you did all these applications with communities last time and you doled out this money, I'm guessing that there wasn't a master plan at Petrick Park with a list of things that to do. So,
Petrick Park got what was left over.
That was.
yeah, and anyways, so we'll put it on the PTAD agenda for February. We'll talk about it. We'll try and come back with something that's in the spirit of what you asked for, as well as some additional information about this previous process.
I remember what you got left over with people that never got the particular project. So
Or if there was money left.
If there was money,
Project.
yeah, it was
So-
under $5,000 as I recall.
So it wasn't literally,
It was more than that, but
I
it
think
wasn't
more than
much.
well, not a lot, but anyway.
Park doesn't get very much.
That's not enough time to get things in, like, formulated for next month for the parks. There is not a pressing urgency to designate that money. It's sitting there, the county has it, you know, I guess I just wanna see that we know where we're actually spending it, rather than just turning it over to parks and saying, do with it what you will.
Okay,
Chair,
I don't think that was our intent.
can
Mr.
you,
George.
are we doing postpone to a certain time?
Well,
We
to
don't
next month,
postpone indefinitely.
hopefully get it settled next month, because I can see we're not gonna get it settled.
I would say
Well,
to
this will be
the,
going back to
I
exec
just
finance.
don't know if it's gonna be enough time.
what do you want?
More than
Time
that.
for what?
I mean, there's probably a lot to discuss. It sounds like there's a lot of people that wanna see a list of other options, so.
So she was gonna bring the list next meeting.
If we, can I just make one last statement? Because I know Emery talked about doing RFPs. This is not a lot of money to send out to everybody. And people might get 1,000 for this or 500 for that. I mean, we were dealing with $1.2 million before. This is not $1.2 million.
But
I guess I
grants
would
of
like to.
$2,000 can have significant impacts within our communities as
And this could have a significant impact on our one and only park that really gets trashed.
I would just like to see that the Parks Committee has a priority list
We do.
of what you're looking at doing first, what's your highest priority, what's your second, third, to see, and then trying to determine as a rough number, how many of those things on your priority list can you get done for this money?
Right, we do have a list.
So if you've got something like that.
It's
that
this
you
money,
could
it's
look
this
at-
money plus the money we already have.
Already have,
Yeah.
right.
So, yeah, we can do that.
And we work in concert with Haley, the conservation specialist. I talked to her last week about how we could utilize some of this for projects that she's working on, so.
Mr. Shays, this is the
Yeah, can we make,
last comment we're gonna take.
yeah, we're done.
Okay.
I wanna move on with the vote,
Okay,
please.
let's go with the tabling till next, or postponing till next month. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
We'll be back next month.
all right.
No one likes the park.
Uh,
Everyone uses the park. It is true. There are people who are
Because they got that whole system.
I know you
Item
are
F,
somebody.
Audit Committee.
Whereas the audit committee has audited the following claims and recommend that they be allowed as follows. John Dawson, $906.77. Kevin Adams, $208.95. Robert Becker, $228.82. Ron Johnson, $499.34. Stacy Klein, $333.84. David Larson, $180.13. Dick Miller, $241.92. Kellen Nelson, $687.59. Jeannie Nutter, $373.36. David Orsh, $427.30. Emery Palmer, $50. Richard Seisha, $252.18. Dan Schreiner, $203.28. Lori Severson, $0. Andy Todd, $260.04. Bridget Turner, $431. Don Waldera, $386.68. Total per diems, $4,550. Total expenses, $1,121.20. Grand total, $5,671.20. Now be it resolved that the claims be allowed as shown, introduced by Audit Committee, John Austin, Robert Becker, Don Waldecker.
Move for approval.
I'll second.
For Mr. Johnson and second by Mr. Turner. You wanna just call the roll?
Stacy Klein,
Yes.
Richard Sasha,
Yes.
Andy Todd,
Yes.
Emery Palmer,
Yes.
Kevin Adams,
Yes.
Dick Miller,
Yes.
David Orsh,
Yes.
John Austin,
Yeah.
Robert Becker,
Yes.
Dan Schreiner,
Yes.
Helen Nelson,
Yes.
David Larson,
Yes.
Jeannie Nutter,
Yes.
Ron Johnson,
Yes.
Bridget Turner.
Yes.
Item G, Human Services Board, create 2 case manager positions and 1 contracting position with Human Services. Got that?
I think I got it over here, yep. Whereas the workload of the Trempealeau County Department of Human Services has grown to exceed the capacity of the current case management and administrative staff positions related to contracting, the Comprehensive Community Services Program, the Community Support Program, and the Children's Long-Term Support Program. Whereas due to the increased workload, the department has had to create wait lists for people referred for services in 2023 for Medicaid programs, which is prohibited by the state. And whereas the inability to provide fully funded Medicaid services to citizens is concerning, especially for those who require mental health services, and the lack thereof could result in a need for more intense and costly crisis intervention that are funded entirely by county levy. And whereas the full wage, benefit, and equipment cost of the additional staff positions in this program would be covered by the Medicaid funding with no additional county levy request. Whereas in the unlikely event that the Medicaid funding for these positions is reduced or eliminated, and there is no alternative non-county levy funding source, and there were no other vacant positions within the department appropriate for those individuals, the department would follow the appropriate county process for eliminating the positions not able to be fully funded immediately. Now be it resolved that the Trumbull County Board of Supervisors hereby approves the creation and addition of 3 new positions in the Department of Human Services to address programmatic and contracting workloads. Introduced by Human Services Board, Dick Miller, Ron Johnson, Bridget Turner, Emery Palmer, Karen Seebeck, Diane Schrader, and that's it.
Move to approve.
Moved by Ms. Nutter,
Second.
second by Mr. Johnson. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Becker.
just a question, how long is that, do you have an agreement with Medicaid to fund this? How long is that agreement, is there a contract or a contract for that?
No, it's an entitlement they're all entitlement programs, so Medicaid, it funds them ongoing, yes.
Started in 1965, Medicaid, so.
Right, I like the part where in case Medicaid runs short, we don't have to absorb it, that's.
Right, well, and the state funds approximately 40% and the feds fund approximately 60%, which fluctuates a little bit, but yes.
Any other questions? Not? You wanna call the roll?
David Larson,
Yes.
Jeannie Nutter,
Yes.
Ron Johnson,
Yes.
Bridget Turner,
Yes.
Stacy Klein,
Yes.
Richard Sasha.
Yes.
Andy Todd.
Yes.
Emery Palmer,
Yes.
Kevin Adams,
Yes.
Dick Miller,
Yes.
David Orsh,
Yes.
John Austin,
Yeah.
Robert Becker,
Yes.
Dan Schreiner,
Yes.
Helen Nelson.
Yes.
15 to 0.
Okay, item E, Board of Health, budget adjustment to public health infrastructure grant.
Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic emphasized the critical importance of a robust public health system, the pandemic also accentuated longstanding weaknesses and created new challenges to the U.S. public health infrastructure. Moreover, COVID-19 affected nearly every aspect of healthcare and public health, laying bare disparities and gaps in some conditions and worsening others. Public health partners need the capacity to regain their footing in these areas and then accelerate their efforts. And whereas the Wisconsin Department of Public Health's goal is for our governmental public health system to be equipped with the financial and human resources needed to provide all foundational capabilities to every community in Wisconsin. Realizing this vision will be dependent on articulating both the anticipated positive human and economic impacts to investing in public health and the exact type of investments required to realize those impacts across the state. Whereas foundational capabilities are the basic set of core functions that underlie the successful execution of governmental public health programs. They align with the 10 essential services and with accreditation, and they include the administrative, organizational, and operational skills and resources required to identify public health needs, design and evaluate programs to meet them, and manage the resources and diverse community partnerships required to implement those programs. Health departments that are equipped to provide the foundational capabilities will be more capable of meeting the unique population health needs of all people in Wisconsin. And whereas the Trumpealeau County Health Department is the recipient of a grant from the Wisconsin Division of Public Health, DPH, in the amount of $125,404. Whereas the grant funds do not require any county matching funds but need to be added to the 2024 budget. Whereas these funds will be used by the Trumpealeau County Health Department to meet the requirements of the foundational capabilities and align with the 10 essential services to expand staffing levels, obtain staff retention, and meet the needs of services to the community. Now be it resolved that $125,404 be added to the 2024 public health budget into revenue account 201.43705 and to expense accounts for wages, benefits, contracted services, supplies, equipment, and continuing educations. Expense account numbers 201.54135.111, $63,022.64, 201.54135.151, $3,907.40, 201.54135.152, $4,348.56, 201.54135.153, $913.83, 101.54135.154, $16,411.57, 201.54135.210, $34,800, 201.54135.314, $700, 201.54135.323, $1,300. Introduced by Board of Health Committee, Bridget Turner, Kevin Adams, Stacy Klein, Dr. Kim Breidenbach. Emery, was he on that one?
Yes.
Can I name you on that one also?
Yes.
Okay, go to next. Now it's formal. That's it.
Yeah, you gotta see a sharp guy. Can you tell me what all these accounts are down here?
You know, when I was reading, I was gonna tell you that the 111 is wages, the 151 is social security, the 152 is retirement, the 153 is Medicare, 154 is health insurance, 210 is professional services, 314 is small items of equipment, and the 323 is education.
Wow, good job.
I'm impressed.
I am.
Okay, motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second by Ms. Klein, second by Ms. Nutter. Any discussion?
Question.
Yes, go ahead.
The wages, benefits that are owned in different accounts, that's, who's that going to? Is that another employee? Or is that paying for something that's already here?
They're not sure yet what they're going to do with this. There's a possibility that they could increase wages to be more competitive in the area for the nurses. They're having a lot of trouble filling positions, and this money could help to increase those grade levels, the steps that we have, to be more competitive. But potentially it could go for another position, but we don't have approval for another position. So it's just going into these accounts, there's not gonna be any money spent. It will come before this board, before any monies are spent.
Okay, Mr. Roy. Oh, go
This
ahead,
is
Emery.
really this is really accepting that grant money which has been set aside, for these operational purposes. So I think it's, it's kind of free money for the county that we're looking to accept and put into those accounts to continue operation of the department and move the department forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Orr.
Yeah, similar to how the resolution was written for the last one we just went through, I forget the name of it, Human Services. What I get concerned about is where we get grants and then we automatically state in a resolution, we're going to expand staffing levels. And that's a one-time grant. It's not like we're gonna keep getting money in to fund that additional staffing level. So I get really nervous, on the Executive Finance Committee where we're gonna have to continue to staff or fund a position that we're never gonna get any more money from COVID. Maybe we would, but chances are we're not gonna get continued funding that way. So, boy, I'd like to strike that wording.
Which is
or
why
rechange
the intent was just to accept the grant monies, no money's being spent at this time.
These are possible uses for the grant money. They are not required uses of the grant money.
It says these funds will be used. So maybe that's an oversight on the verbiage there, but I get really nervous about adding staff or having the ability to add staff without executive finance oversight of where the additional money is going to come from for the future.
Would you be comfortable with an amendment to may be used?
I'd like to hear from Corp Counsel what your recommendation.
Understanding the different positions here, an alternative would be that these funds will be used as is consistent with the grant requirements. And just leave it as that. Because all of these grants, whether it's DHS or whatnot, they're going to have specific contractual requirements, and if we're already to this point, we've probably agreed to them. Although this is the formal vote on this. But as long as you're doing that, I think there's a way to address the issues that you're discussing and also continue moving forward and looking at it.
And it still has to come to the full board before any money's spent, no matter what. So we're just still oversight there.
No, once it's in your account.
Oh, not the way. Oh.
Foundational capabilities, but that must be a program, isn't it? The foundational capabilities and the 10 essential services.
That's part of the code for the health department and the requirements for this grant.
So I would make a motion to change that last paragraph to read after the foundational capabilities in line with the 10 essential services to meet grant objectives.
I would second that. To meet grant expectations.
What was the word you used, Emery?
Emery, objectives.
Objectives.
Chair, I think I don't necessarily disagree with that verbiage that Supervisor Palmer just stated, but it would also need to include taking out the specific items of where the money's going to go.
Account numbers.
All those.
That needs to go away too. Then.
So then it would all just go into one main account for this grant specifically.
Oh, it is just one revenue, but it's, all of those expenses would probably just go into a no line detail.
And I believe these are kind of allocated, largely speaking, towards existing expenses. Is that necessary to accept this grant, or can we put them in those accounts, and then if spending is not in line with those accounts, come back later to modify transfer funds? What is the cleanest, easiest way to do this to move forward?
I think it's easier to keep them as one lump initially,
If
rather
that you would
than,
need to
because
create
otherwise
a
they're
new
gonna have to
account.
go through each account and subtract money to put in another account, and I think it would be cleaner. Right, Paul?
Just give one, not,
Yes.
no line detail, which is 999.
And that's Emery
You got it anyway.
and Jean.
Would that
what
be
your
changing
your
it
amendment
to
is.
just
Emery, you would have to
Yes.
change your amendment to reflect that, to remove all of those accounts, that it's just gonna be line item 999, one account.
So yes, I'd like to modify my amendment to reflect removing the rest of those accounts, and if I'm speaking correctly, just leave it going into revenue account 201.43705.
Yeah, but I gotta have another side to it, so that's why we
Expense.
use the expense side of the 999 instead of all these individual ones.
Okay, yep, that would be acceptable to me.
Okay, now,
My audio is cutting out a little bit, so I apologize.
okay, now, I'll
You're still
second.
seconding?
Oh, just
So
can't speak.
are we still changing the line in the whereas of that? Whereas these funds used by Trumbull County Health Department meet the requirement of foundation capabilities and align with 10 essential services.
To meet the objectives. I
To meet
crossed
the-
the rest of that out.
Yes.
Meet objectives, okay.
Yep, that's easy.
That's the purpose of the grant anyway, so.
Does that sound,
To meet grant
Okay.
objectives, it's fine.
To meet, oh, I forgot that word, grant, objectives. Yep.
okay, everybody got, go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Now, in order to access this money in the 999 account, what is the process?
The department head, probably with counseling with the committee, can transfer that money anyplace.
So the committee can transfer? Is that what you
That
want?
would probably have to go with our new administrator
With the
too, I would
administrator
think.
coming on, they won't be able to do that without getting the administrators,
Right.
It wouldn't be technically be a transfer, it'd just be dispersing it to the
Dispersing
correct
it,
accounts.
right.
For correct object numbers.
Objects, yeah.
We just need to accept this money.
So this takes care of that, accepting the money, just doesn't say where it's going. Okay, everybody square with that? So, motion to approve the agenda as amended. The resolution as amended. Want to call the roll?
Would you want to roll on?
Yeah.
Just
Right. I wouldn't get that money involved.
Well, at this point, yeah, it's just changing the account.
Well, either way, it was accepting money, it would have to be a roll call.
Well, yeah, the, as amended would be, okay, we'll do that. This is on the amendment, okay? Jeannie Nutter.
Yes.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Bridget Turner.
Yes.
Stacy Klein.
Yes.
Richard Seixas.
Yes.
Andy Todd.
Yes.
Emery Palmer.
Yes.
Kevin Adams.
Yes.
Dick Miller.
Yes.
David Orsh.
Yes.
John Awesome.
Yes.
Robert Becker.
Yes.
Dan Schreiner.
Yes.
Helen Nelson.
Yes.
David Larson.
Yes.
Now the original motion.
As amended.
Yes.
So,
Any more discussion?
Roll call that too.
Okay. Andy Todd.
Yes.
Emery Palmer.
Yes.
Kevin Adams.
Yes.
Dick Miller.
Yes.
David Orsh.
Yes.
John Awesome.
Yeah.
Robert Becker.
Yes.
Dan Schreiner.
Yes.
Helen Nelson.
Yes.
David Larson.
Yes.
Jeannie Nutter.
yes.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Richard Turner.
Yes.
Stacy Klein.
Yes.
Richard Seixas.
Yes.
15-0.
Okay. Any announcements? Appointments?
Nope, I didn't have anything there.
Okay. Committee report? Budget update?
In your packets, you would have gotten the county sales and general fund updates, and on your tables were the budget updates.
Any correspondence?
No.
Okay. Item 10. Motion to instruct the clerk to pay mileage and per diem.
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Hess, second by Ms. Turner. Okay, call the roll.
David Orsh.
Yes.
John Austin.
Yes.
Robert Becker.
Yes.
Dan Schreiner.
Yes.
Kellen Nelson.
Yes.
David Larson.
Yes.
Judy Nutter.
Yes.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Bridget Turner.
Yes.
Stacy Klein.
Yes.
Richard Seychelle.
Yes.
Andy Todd.
Yes.
Emery Palmer.
Yes.
Kevin Adams.
Yes.
Dick Miller.
Yes.
Okay, we can adjourn this meeting at 8:30.